The Middle Ages in Romania began with the withdrawal of the Mongols, the last of the migrating populations to invade the territory of modern Romania, after their attack of 1241 to 1242. It came to an end with the reign of Michael the Brave, who managed for a short time in 1600 to rule Wallachia, Moldavia and Transylvania, the three principalities whose territories were to be united some 3 centuries later to form Romania. Over most of this period, Banat, Crişana, Maramureş and Transylvania, now regions in Romania to the west of the Carpathian Mountains, were part of the Kingdom of Hungary. They were divided into several types of administrative units, such as counties and seats. The heads of the Transylvanian counties or counts were subordinated to a special royal official called voivode, but the province was seldom treated as a single unit, since the Secli and Saxon seats were administered separately. In the kingdom, Romanian peasants, being Orthodox, were exempt from the tithe, an ecclesiastical tax payable by all Roman Catholic commoners. However, Romanian noblemen slowly lost the ability to participate in political life, as the 14th-century monarchs pursued a zealous pro-Catholic policy. The position became even worse after 1437, when the so-called Union of Three Nations, an alliance of the Hungarian noblemen, the Seclis, and the Saxons, was formed in order to crush the Bobalna peasant uprising. Wallachia, the first independent medieval state between the Carpathians and the Lower Danube, was created when Basarabide terminated the suzerainty of the King of Hungary with his victory in the Battle of Posada in 1330. The independence of Moldavia, to the east of the Carpathians, was achieved by Bogdan I, a nobleman from Maramureş, who led a revolt against the former ruler who was appointed by the Hungarian monarch. The independence of the two principalities, however, was rarely secure, and vassalage to multiple states became an important aspect of the diplomacy. Although Wallachia paid tribute to the Ottoman Empire from 1417, and Moldavia from 1456, the two medieval monarchs, Misha the Old of Wallachia and Stephen the Great of Moldavia, conducted successful military operations against the Ottoman Turks. The two principalities' trade with other parts of Europe began to decrease after the last decades of the 15th century. Before this, the sale of hides, grain, honey, and wax to the Holy Roman Empire, Venice and Poland, and the import of silk, weapons and other manufactured goods from these areas had been widespread. But by the end of the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire became the main market for Romanian products. Transylvania, together with the neighboring counties, gained the status of an autonomous state under Ottoman suzerainty after the central territories of the Kingdom of Hungary had been annexed by the Ottomans in 1541. The fall of the kingdom also deprived Wallachia and Moldavia of the main ally in the struggle against the Ottoman Empire. In 1594, Michael the Brave of Wallachia joined an anti-Ottoman alliance initiated by Pope Clement VIII. After a series of victory over the Ottomans, he turned against Transylvania and Moldavia, where pro-Polish and pro-Ottoman princes were reigning. He invaded and occupied Transylvania in 1599, and Moldavia in 1600. Although the union of the three countries collapsed in 4 months, it served as an ideal for later generations working for the unification of the lands that now form Romania. Background: at the end of the 8th century, the establishment of the Khazar Khaganate north of the Caucasus Mountains created an obstacle in the path of nomadic people moving westward. In the following period, the local population of the Carpathian Danubian area profited from the peaceful political climate and a unitary material culture called Trigu that developed in the region. Finds from the Driju settlements, such as colters and sickles, confirm the role of agriculture in their economy. In the 9th century, centrifugal movements commenced in the Khazar Khaganate. One of the subject peoples, the Hungarians, left its dominion and settled in the region between the rivers Don and Dniester. They abandoned the steppes and crossed the Carpathians around 896. According to the 13th century Gesta Hungarorum, at the time of the Hungarian invasion, Transylvania was inhabited by Romanians and Slavs and ruled by Gelus of certain Romanian, while Crişana was inhabited by several peoples, among them Sekles. Whether the author of the Gesta had any knowledge of the real conditions of the turn of the 9th and 10th centuries remains debated by historians. In 953 the Gayula, the second leader in rank of the Hungarian tribal federation, converted to Christianity in Constantinople. Around that time, according to the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII, the Hungarians controlled the region on the border of modern Romania and Hungary along the rivers Timuș, Mureș, Cristisa and Târtuș. In 1003, as the Annals of Hildesheim narrates, Stephen I, the first crowned monarch of Hungary, led an army against his maternal uncle, King Gayula, and occupied Gayula's country. Stephen I granted privileges to the Roman Catholic Church, for example by ordering the general imposition of the tithe upon the population. Burials in most local pre-Christian cemeteries, for example at Hunduara, only ceased around 1100. Stephen I also divided his kingdom, including the territories of modern Romania he had occupied, into counties, that is, administrative units around royal fortresses, each administered by a royal official called count. In time the voivode, a high royal official first attested in 1176, became the principal of all the counts in Transylvania. In contrast with Transylvania, the counts in modern Banat and Crişana remained in direct contact with the king, who appointed and replaced them at will. From the end of the 9th century the Pechenegs controlled the territories to the east and south of the Carpathians. According to the Iman saga, they fought together with the Blockman in the Kievan Rus in the 1010s. The Pechenegs were swept aside from the territories by the Cumans between 1064 and 1078. A late variant of the oldest Turkish chronicle, the Ohuz name, relates that the Cumans defeated many nations, including the Ulaq. Some of the Pechenegs fled into the Kingdom of Hungary, where they were employed to guard the border districts, for instance in Transylvania. The 11th century settlements in Transylvania are characterized by small huts with ceramic assemblages marked by clay cauldrons. The increasing number of coin finds suggests that the province experienced economic growth in the late 11th century. The first document pertaining to the province is a royal charter of 1075 referring to taxes on salt levied at Turda, the earliest precious metal mine in medieval Transylvania. The silver mine at Rodna was first mentioned in 1235. In the 12th and 13th centuries, hospitash arrived in Transylvania from Germany and from the French-speaking regions on the river Rhine, who in time became collectively known as Saxons. In 1224 Andrew II of Hungary granted special liberties to the Saxons who had settled in southern Transylvania. For instance, they were authorized to choose the local leaders. Only the head of the entire community, the Count of Sibiu, was appointed by the king. They were also granted the right to use the forest of the Romanians and the Pechenegs. The first references to viniculture in Transylvania are connected to the vineyards of the hospitash of Cricca and Romus. As a result of the Saxon immigration, the Sekes, Hungarian-speaking free warriors cultivating communal lands, were transferred to the southeast of the province. From the 13th century they were governed independently independently from the voivode by a royal official, the Count of the Sekles. Besides the Saxons, the Cistercians became the agents of expansion in Transylvania, when their abbey at Carta was established in the early 13th century. Andrew II ordered that the strip of land running up to the mountains between the rivers Olt, Cartishara and Arpa be transferred from the Romanians to the new monastery. Following the defeat of the Cumans by the Mongols on the river Kalka in 1223, some chieftains of the western Cuman tribes accepted the authority of the King of Hungary. The conversion led to the creation of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Cumania to the east of the Carpathians. However, the Orthodox Romanian population of the territory received the sacraments from some pseudo-bishops of the Greek Rite, according to a papal bull of 1234. In 1233, Oltenia was organized into a military frontier zone of the Kingdom of Hungary, called the Banat of Severin. The expansion across the Carpathians was stopped by the invasion of the Mongols that lasted from March 31, 1241 to April 1242. It was a major watershed in the medieval history of the region. Although the number of casualties is disputed, even the most prudent estimates do not go below 15% of the total population. High Middle Ages. Outer Carpathian regions. After the withdrawal from the Kingdom of Hungary, the Mongol forces halted at Sara on the Volga River, where the leader, Batu Khan, set up his own capital. Henceforth, the steppes between the rivers Dnieper and Danube were under the influence of the Mongols of the Volga, known as the Golden Horde. For the 1260s, a relative of Batu's, Nogai Khan, settled at Azaxia on the lower Danube and became the absolute master of the neighboring regions. He made himself independent of the Golden Horde around 1280, but was killed in a battle in 1299. By the middle of the 14th century, the westernmost Mongol territories had become subject to frequent Polish and Hungarian military offensives. Grand Prince Olgierd of Lithuania penetrated farther into the territories controlled by the Golden Horde than any European army had hitherto done. He won a major victory over the united Mongol troops on the Dnieper near the Black Sea in 1363. Intra-Carpathian regions having been raided twice by the Mongols within a single year, Transylvania felt the consequences of the invasion of 1241 to 1242 for more than 2 decades. The administrative centers of the province, such as Alba Iulia and Cetia de Bolta, had been destroyed. Due to the severe depopulation, a process of organized colonization commenced that lasted for several decades. For example, a new wave of colonization resulted in the establishment of the Saxon seats of Sighișoara and Medias, and the Lord of Ilia received, in 1292, royal permission to settle Romanians in the lands he owned, since only castles built of stone and walled towns had been able to resist Mongol attacks. Following the withdrawal of the Mongols, the kings encouraged both the landowners and the townspeople to build stone fortifications. New stone fortresses were built, for example, at Kodlia, Rimati, and Unguris. The process of urbanization was characterized by the predominance of the Saxon towns. Out of the 8 towns in Transylvania, only Alba Iulia and Dej were situated in the counties. A charter referring to inns, bakeries, and bathhouses in Rodna proves the city-like way of life of its inhabitants. Salt was still the most important item of trade in this period, but trading with oxen, maid servants, and wine is also documented in royal charters. In 1257, Beacute of Hungary appointed his eldest son, the future Stephen V, to govern the kingdom's territories to the east of the Danube. Here the younger king ceded a significant part of his royal domains to noblemen. The first years of the reign of Ladislaus IV of Hungary were characterized by civil wars throughout the entire kingdom. In Transylvania, the Saxons engaged in a local conflict with the bishop, took Alba Iulia and set fire to the cathedral. The series of wars continued in 1285 with a second Mongol invasion. During its initial stage, the Sekles, the Romanians and the Saxons successfully blocked the Mongols' access and later organized a series of ambushes provoking panic among the retreating invaders. By that time, the Romanians' military role had expanded from their original task of defending the kingdom's frontiers. They participated in several military campaigns, for example against Bohemia in 1260 and against Austria in 1291. Their economic role became also recognized, since the pastoral activities connected to cloth production of the Saxon settlements. To the monarchs, they paid a special tax in sheep, called the 50th. Andrew III of Hungary even ordered, in 1293, that all the Romanians who had been settled without royal permission on noble domains be returned to the royal estate of Armenia. In the last decades of the 13th century, Congregatia Generalis convoked by the monarchs of the representatives became an important organ of court system. For instance, the General Assembly convoked in 1279 by Ladislaus IV for 7 counties, among them Bihor, Crişana, Satma, and Zarand in the territory what is now Romania, ended with sentencing a despotic person to death. The first charter referring to a General Assembly of the Transylvanian counties was recorded in 1288. A General Assembly of the Transylvanian nobles, Saxons, Sekles and Romanians was convoked personally by the monarch in 1291. When Andrew III died in 1301, the entire kingdom was in the hands of a dozen powerful noblemen. Among them, Roland Borsa ruled Crişana, Theodore of Vegeta gained the upper hand in the Banat, and Ladislaus Can governed Transylvania. The latter's authority was also recognized by the Saxons and the Sekles. He even assumed royal prerogatives, such as taking over lands lacking rightful owners. After 1310, he acknowledged Charles I of Hungary as his sovereign, but in fact continued to rule independently. The king, who transferred his residence to Timișoara in 1315, could only strengthen his authority after a long series of confrontations. For instance, Sissa, the last stronghold of Ladislaus Can's sons, surrendered in 1321. After the king's victory, one of his loyal adherents, Thomas Sedi was appointed voivode who suppressed a Saxon revolt in 1324. At the time, the autonomous Saxon province was divided into seats, each administered by a judge appointed by the king. In appreciation of the Transylvanian noblemen's services in the crushing of the revolt, Charles I exempted them from the taxes they had so far paid to the voivodes. In this period, one of the major incentives for the growth of Transylvanian towns was the trade with Wallachia and Moldavia. For instance, Brasov was granted a staple right in 1369 with respect to the trade in cloth from Poland and Germany. Thereafter, foreign merchants had to sell the most sought-after merchandise, broadcloth, to the tradesmen of Brasov, who resold it in Wallachia in exchange for animals, cotton, wax and honey. In the 14th century, the name district was generalized for the forms of territorial organizations of the Romanians, but only few of them. For instance, the district in Bereg County achieved official recognition. Maramureş, where Romanians were first mentioned in 1326, was the only district that transformed, around 1380, into a county. Louis I of Hungary issued a royal decree in 1366 which prescribed firm judicial measures against the malefactors of any nation, especially Romanians. Louis Louis I's decree also regulated the legal status of the sneezes, the Romanians' local leaders, by establishing a distinction between sneezes brought to their lands by royal writ whose testimony in court weighed like that of nobles, and others whose evidence counted for less. This distinction, however, did not mean real nobility and grant them exemption from royal taxes, even for the noble sneezes. The status corresponded to that of the Hungarian conditional nobles, whose nobility depended on the specified military services they were to render. According to a royal decree of 1428, Louis I had also ordered that only Catholics be granted land in the Sebes district of Timiș County. As a result of official pressure, many Romanian noblemen converted to Catholicism. For example, the members of the powerful Dragfi family turned Catholic in the 15th century. The Ottomans raided Transylvania for the first time in 1394. Sigismund I of Hungary organized a crusade against them, but the Battle of Nicopolis ended in disaster for the Christian forces in 1396. Establishment of Wallachia according to a charter issued by B. Acute Laiv of Hungary for the Knights Hospitallers in 1247. At that time at least 4 polities existed in the area to the south of the Carpathians. 2 of them, the Cnezats of John and Farka, were granted to the knights, but the lands ruled by Litovoi and Stanislaw were left to the Ulati, just as they have owned it. In the 1270s, Litovoi extended his territory and stopped paying tribute to the king, but his army was defeated by the royal forces, and he was killed in the battle. Romanian historical tradition associates the foundation of Wallachia with the dismounting of Radu Negru, who crossed the Carpathians from Transylvania accompanied by Romanians, Papists, Saxons, and all kind of men, around 1290. The first sovereign of Wallachia recorded in contemporary sources was Basarab, who obtained international recognition for the independence of the principality by his victory over Charles I of Hungary in the Battle of Posada on November 12, 1330. The princes of Wallachia were chosen from among his descendants, either legitimate or not, by an assembly of the boyars until the 16th century. The boyars, members of the landed nobility, formed the most important social group in the principality. The vast majority of the population was formed by peasants who were called several names, such as Vecini Rumeni, in medieval documents. In this period, animals, especially sheep, remained the main item of export, but from the Wallachian plain great quantities of grain were transported to the Mediterranean area. The basis of the peasants' diet was formed by millet eaten as porridge, while the boyars also used wheat. The Orthodox Metropolitan See of Wallachia was recognized by the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople in 1359. Wallachia issued its own currency. Under Vladislav I, the earliest written information about gypsies in modern Romania, a deed issued by Danai of Wallachia refers to Vladislav I's former donation of gypsies to the Vodita monastery. Later on, all the important monasteries and boyars owned gypsy slaves. The Ottomans entered for the first time into Wallachia in 1395. Although the invading troops were defeated somewhere in a ravina in Oltenia, the chaos created by the threat of attacks allowed a group of boyars to put Vlad the usurper on the throne. Thus Misha I was forced to take refuge in Transylvania, where he agreed to be Sigismund I of Hungary's vassal. He was restored to the throne and participated in the disastrous Crusade of Nicopolis organized by Sigismund I. Establishment of Moldavia. After 1241, the territory between the eastern Carpathians and the Dniester was controlled by the Golden Horde. Nevertheless, the contemporary Thomas Duscus's reference to the Romanians' conflict with the Ruthenians in 1277 suggests that Romanian political entities existed in northern Moldavia at the time. In 1345, Andrew Lacfi, the Count of the Secchies, led an army over the Carpathians and occupied this region, where a border province was organized by Louis I of Hungary. Romanian historical tradition links the foundation of Moldavia to the dismounting of Dragoș, the Romanian voivode from Maramureş. Although Dragoș was succeeded by his son, Șaș, his line did not last long. His descendants were soon expelled by Bogdan, a former voivode of Maramureş, who fled to Moldavia and joined with local boyars in a revolt. In Moldavia, agriculture and animal raising remained the principal economic activities. Similarly to Wallachia, wooden plough remained the main agricultural tool throughout the Middle Ages. The constant clearing of land shows that finding new land was still preferred to crop rotation. The establishment of the principality enhanced the security of travel. Thus, Moldavia could also profit from the transit trade between Poland and the Black Sea ports. The first local coins were minted in 1377, under Peter I Musat. The succession to the throne, similarly to Wallachia, was governed by the hereditary elective principle. Thus, either a legitimate or an illegitimate member of the Musatin family could be proclaimed prince by an assembly of the boyars. In 1387, Peter I Musat recognized Vladislav II Jagiello of Poland as his suzerain. But Hungary also maintained its claim of suzerainty over the principality. Therefore, the princes of Moldavia could counterbalance the influence of Poland and Hungary by playing one off against the other. Dobruja. After 1242, most of the territory between the Danube and the Black Sea was included in the area dominated by the Mongols. Although the Byzantine Empire re-established control over the Danube Delta in the 1260s, it fell again under the direct rule of the Golden Horde sometime before 1337. By the end of the 13th century, flourishing communities of Genoese merchants had settled in the towns of Versina, Chilia and Licostomo. Towards the middle of the 14th century, a state dependent of the Byzantine Empire, known as the country of Kavarna, developed in the region. Its first known ruler was Balaka. He was succeeded by his brother Dobrotica, for whom part of his holdings, Dobruja, received its name. In about 1385, Ivanko became the ruler of the territory, but he soon disappeared during an Ottoman expedition. Dobruja was occupied by Mishrai of Wallachia in 1390 and by the Ottomans in 1395.